Good afternoon to all my Israel briefers and welcome to the Israel Brief with me, Rolene Marks, where we take a look at those top stories making headlines in Israel every Monday to Thursday. The headlines that you will not see in the legacy or mainstream media. And today is day 537 since the atrocities of the 7th of October. And of course, as we do every day and as we will continue to do until the last hostage has been returned home to us, there are still 59 hostages held captive in the Gaza Strip by Hamas and the other terror organizations. We believe 24 to still be alive, but time is running out, and 35 to no longer be with us. We need those that are still alive to be brought home so that they can start the long process to recovery and rehabilitation, and those that are no longer with us, that have been murdered by the Hamas and their cohorts, to be laid to rest with a dignified burial. As you can hear, it's taking a little bit of a strain on me to speak, so I really appreciate your patience as I croak through this report. And it's very, very important that we meet today because our first story is, I won't say unprecedented because it has happened before, albeit very, very small, but very, very unusual. And the question submitted by a viewer today is also very, very pertinent. So without further ado, let's get into the top story. And today marks the second consecutive day of protests across the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, Gazans were taking to social media to show footage of hundreds, and I think that number is growing stronger and stronger, who first started in the north of the strip in places like Beit Lahia and Shujaya, and are moving steadily throughout other parts of the strip, demanding that Hamas get out. There have been calls of out Hamas, and we will not sacrifice our children for your war. There have been actually a few signs calling for Hamas to release the hostages, one or two saying yes to peace, no to tyranny, and Hamas is a terrorist. Now, what I do find extremely, extremely interesting is that Al Jazeera, that is the TV channel that is sponsored by the Qataris, that basically are the mouthpiece of Hamas, are nowhere to be seen. It has also taken a long time for the mainstream media like the BBC and Sky and CNN and all of them to pick up on these protests. Why? I think it is because it doesn't support that narrative of Hamas being the resistance, so to speak. Naturally, Israelis have been watching this very, very curiously, hoping that this will lead to something, a movement that is substantial in the Gaza Strip that would get rid of Hamas, and that we can start to build our lives right here in our region. We have said so many times that we will not allow for Hamas to rule over the Gaza Strip, and who knows, maybe this message is permeating into Palestinian society. Now, of course, Israelis are under no illusions. We don't think that we are going to run off into the sunset together and sing Kumbaya, but this is a significant step. And you can be sure that any Gazans who reach out to Israelis with the intention of peace, real, sincere peace, will be met by Israelis also wanting that kind of peace. So rumor has it that these protests will spread to other parts of the Gaza Strip, and one or two have even posted that this might even spread to the West Bank, or as some people call it, Judea and Samaria. I know for some of our listeners they get upset if I mention West Bank. However, that is what the international community recognize the area as. So in order to not create confusion, I try to use both terminologies. What I also find interesting, because this is not the first time that we have seen protests in the Gaza Strip against Hamas. But we have in the past seen Hamas quickly crush those protests. But what it tells me is that Israel has dealt significantly a blow to Hamas, that people in Gaza feel empowered, that they can come out into the streets and start protesting. And as you can imagine, we will be watching this very closely. Next week, the IDF are expected to present their investigative findings into the massacre at the Nova Music Festival on the 7th of October. The findings will be presented to bereaved families, survivors and hostage families, and the IDF are expected to glean and learn from any failures that led to this massacre and their response time. In recent weeks, the IDF have been presenting their findings so far into the attacks on various bases as well as kibbutzim. Now, what will happen next week is that bereaved families and survivors will receive a text from the IDF that will alert them to the report that is waiting for them to see it. In a speech in the Knesset today, Prime Minister Netanyahu has threatened to annex some territory in Gaza unless Hamas hand back the hostages. Now, this is a sentiment that echoes the words of our Defense Minister Israel Katz, who also said earlier this week, hand back the hostages or face consequences. And those consequences will be Israel annexing territory in Gaza. If there's one thing that we have learned is that Hamas don't care about their citizens, their civilians, but they do care about territory. So we are hoping that Hamas hears these threats loud and clear. Meanwhile, earlier today, Hamas fired rockets towards Gaza enveloped communities. One was intercepted by the Iron Dome system and the other landed in an empty field. And finally, President Isaac Herzog, along with his Polish counterpart, President Andrzej Duda, will lead this year's March of the Living event. The March of the Living, which takes place every year on the anniversary of Yom HaShoah, or to coincide with Israel's Holocaust Martyrs and Memorial Day, will mark 80 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp. The presidents will be joined by 80 Holocaust survivors from around the world, 40 from Israel and 40 from around the world, where they will march from Auschwitz to Birkenau along with all the other participants. As time marches on, it has become an imperative for every single one of us to make sure that the lessons learned and the stories of survivors are passed from our generation to the next generation, because we lose on a daily basis more and more of our precious survivors. So those are our headlines, and just a reminder to you all, tomorrow we take a look at the Mensch and Moron of the week, and the list is starting to fill up, so make sure that you get your Mensch and Moron over to me. Today's audience question comes from Ruth in Inverness in the Scottish Highlands. Oh, Ruth, I'm so envious. What a beautiful place to live in. And while I don't have a wee dram of whiskey while I answer it, this question is so important. Ruth asks, why does Israel and the IDF not allow journalists in Gaza? That this is something that the BBC and other broadcasters have brought up. Well, I had the privilege this week of interviewing Andrew Fox, a retired major from the British forces, who has spent a significant time in Gaza looking at how the IDF are prosecuting this war and learning lessons that military experts can glean from this particular kind of urban warfare. And I asked him this very question. I said, you're a disinformation expert. You know, has Israel basically shot itself in the foot by not allowing journalists into Gaza? And he said to me, he said, no. He says, first of all, Journalists have been allowed into Gaza. They have gone in with the IDF. And as we know, there are two ways to get into Gaza. One with the IDF and two with Hamas. We know what would happen to a Western journalist had they gone in with Hamas. If they weren't kidnapped or threatened or killed, Hamas control everything, including the narrative that comes out of the Gaza Strip. As far as Israel is concerned, we don't want to risk the lives of journalists. And as he explained, he said, this is not a war like Afghanistan or other wars where you can embed journalists, and although they don't get to the combat point, they can basically see what's going on. He says, this kind of warfare in Gaza, because it is so dense, so concentrated, is fought 360 from the tunnels below, from snipers above, and all around. And that would put journalists in an extremely, extremely dangerous position. And the IDF don't want any dead journalists. So that explains why we are not letting journalists in to be at the point of combat. Having said that, just to remind you, journalists have gone in on embeds with the IDF where that has been allowed. So I hope that answers that question for you, Ruth. It's such an important one, and one that bears reminding to people like Piers Morgan and others who have really, really criticized Israel. So that's it from me for today, guys. Don't forget our social media on our website at www.layoftheland.online. We are right here on YouTube at the Israel Brief. If you like our content, please hit that subscribe button. We really want to get out to as many people as possible. We are on Facebook at Lottel's Site, on X at Lay of the Land 5, on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, and on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks. Guys, God bless you all. Take care of yourselves. I'll take care of myself, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.